In my previous video, I hinted about the fields of psychology. So today we're going to study about fields of psychology and their scope. As we all know that psychology is a broad field that encompasses many different subfields and areas of study. So first of all, we're going to study about clinical psychology. Clinical psychology is a subfield of psychology that deals with the assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of mental disorders. Clinical psychologists work with individuals, couples, and families to help them cope with a variety of issues including anxiety, depression, and addiction. The scope of clinical psychology includes counseling, psychotherapy, and behavior interventions to help individuals improve their mental health. Next is counseling psychology. Counseling psychology focuses on helping individuals with personal and social issues that may impact their daily lives. These fields help individuals cope with difficulties such as stress, relationship problems, and career issues. The scope of counseling psychology includes the development of skills, knowledge, and abilities to help individuals enhance their psychological well-being. Here comes social psychology. Social psychology is the application of psychological principles to the educational setting. This field focuses on addressing the academic, social, and emotional needs of students. Social psychologists work with students, parents, and teachers to help students overcome learning challenges and achieve academic success. Then there is educational psychology. Educational psychology is the study of how people learn in educational settings, including schools, colleges, and universities. These fields look at how to design effective learning environments, how to motivate students, and how to improve teaching methods. The scope of educational psychology includes understanding how learning occurs, developing effective learning strategies, and improving educational outcomes. Then there is developmental psychology. Developmental psychology is the study of how individuals develop and change throughout their lives from infancy to old age. These fields look at physical, cognitive, and social changes that occur at different stages of life. The scope of development psychology includes understanding how individuals change and develop and identifying factors that contribute to positive development. Next is personality psychology. Personality psychology is the study of personality traits, patterns, and characteristics. This field seeks to understand why people behave the way they do and how personality influences behavior. The scope of personality psychology includes understanding individuals' differences, identifying personality traits, and developing theories of personality. Next is social psychology. Social psychology is the study of how people interact with others and how their behavior is influenced by social factors such as group dynamics, social norms, and cultural differences. These fields look at how individuals and groups are affected by their social environments. The scope of social psychology includes understanding social cognition, attitudes, and social influence. Next is environmental psychology. Environmental psychology is the study of how people interact with their physical environment. The fields look at how the environment affects behavior and how behavior affects the environment. The scope of environmental psychology includes understanding how individuals perceive their environment, how the environment affects mental health, and how to design environments that promote well-being. Here comes experimental psychology. Experimental psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. This field uses experimental methods to test theories and hypotheses about human behavior. The scope of experimental psychology includes conducting experiments, analyzing data, and developing theories of behavior. Next is industrial psychology. Industrial psychology is the application of psychology in the workplace. This field focuses on improving organizational performance, employee satisfaction, and workplace safety. The scope of industrial psychology includes understanding job satisfaction, developing effective training programs, and identifying factors that contribute to employee turnover. Next is organizational psychology. Organizational psychology is the study of how people behave within organizations. These fields look at how individuals interact with their work environment and how organizations can improve productivity and employee satisfaction. Organizational psychologists work with businesses to identify problems and develop solutions that promote productivity and employee well-being. Next is consumer psychology, and it is a very interesting field of psychology. Consumer psychology is the study of how people make decisions and relate it to purchasing and consumption. These fields look at how marketing and advertising affect consumer behavior as well as how product design and pricing influence purchasing decisions. The scope of consumer psychology includes understanding how consumers perceive and evaluate products and how to develop effective marketing strategies. Next is health psychology. In health psychology, we study how psychological factors influence physical health and illness. This field looks at how stress, emotions, and behavior can affect health outcomes as well as how individuals can improve their health throughout behavioral changes. The scope of health psychology includes understanding how to promote health behaviors, manage chronic illnesses, and improve patient outcomes. Next is forensic psychology. Forensic psychology is the intersection of psychology and the legal system. This field involves applying psychological principles to legal issues such as criminal investigations, court proceedings, and correctional facilities. Forensic psychologists may work with law enforcement to assess suspects, provide expert testimony in court, or develop treatment plans for individuals in the criminal justice system. Next is criminal psychology. Criminal psychology is focused specifically on criminal behavior. Criminal psychology is primarily concerned with understanding the behavior and motivations of criminals. Its scope is that criminal psychologists may work in research, academia, or in the criminal justice system. Next is sports psychology. Sports psychology is the study of how psychological factors affect athletic performance and well-being. This field looks at how to improve motivation, self-confidence, and mental toughness in athletes, as well as how to cope with injuries and other setbacks. Sports psychologists may work with individual athletes, teams, or entire organizations. Next is sensation and perception psychology. Sensation and perception psychology is the study of how individuals process and interpret sensory information. These fields look at how individuals perceive the world around them, including visual, auditory, and tactile stimuli. The scope of sensation and perception psychology includes understanding how the brain processes sensory information, as well as how individuals can promote their perception skills. Next is comparative psychology, and it is also a very interesting field of psychology. In comparative psychology, we study how animals and humans behave and how they differ from one another. These fields look at how animals learn, communicate, and interact with their environment, as well as how they compare to human behavior. The scope of comparative psychology includes understanding the similarities and differences between animals and human behavior. Here comes cognitive psychology. While cognitive psychology is the study of how individuals processes, store, and use information. This field look at how individuals perceive, think, and reason, as well as how they learn and remember. The scope of cognitive psychology includes understanding how to improve memory, develop critical thinking skills, and design effective learning environment. Next is biopsychology. Biopsychology, also known as behavioral neuroscience, is the study of how the brain and nervous system influence behavior. This field looks at how genetics, hormones, and neurotransmitters affect behavior, as well as how the brain damage or dysfunction can lead to psychological disorders. The scope of biopsychology includes understanding how the brain and body interact to produce behavior. Interesting, isn't it? Next is gender psychology. Gender psychology is the study of how gender affects behavior and psychological processes. These fields look at how gender identity, stereotypes, and socialization can affect personality and behavior, as well as how gender differences manifest in cognitive and emotional processes. The scope of gender psychology includes understanding how to promote gender equity and diversity. Next is evolutionary psychology. We all know about Darwin's theory. Evolutionary psychology is not different than Darwin's theory. This field studies how human behavior has evolved over time through natural selection. This field looks at how evolutionary principles have shaped human cognition, emotion, and behavior, and how these traits have adapted to our environment. The scope of evolutionary psychology includes understanding how human behavior has been influenced on our evolutionary history. Next is cultural psychology. Culture psychology is the study of how culture influences human behavior and thought processes. This field looks at how different culture contexts shape our perception, emotion, and cognition, as well as how individuals adapt to new culture environments. The scope of culture psychology includes understanding how culture affects identity and mental health, and communication across diverse culture groups. Well, that's all for today.